Good evening, and welcome to the Synovial Sarcoma Foundation's second webinar. We're really excited to be here tonight and to be showcasing a number of really exciting updates and progress on the foundation's part. And we're joined by a number of really important members of our community and our team. And I'd like to introduce them very quickly. But we're joined by Julie Kramer, who is the newest member of our team. And we'll be very excited to ask her a number of questions about not only her role at the foundation, but also her journey as a synovial sarcoma survivor herself. We also have Dr. Ted Leitch, who leads our medical advisory board and has been instrumental with a number of research projects that the foundation has funded in coordination with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and Penn Medicine. And Dr. Hurley, who has been leading some really exciting research at CHOP and Penn as well, and has been doing some really exciting work in the lab that we'll be asking her some detailed questions about. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Chas Spence, who's the executive director and founder of our foundation, and myself, who I probably should have introduced first, but I'm not following my notes well enough. So forgive me, but I'm Nathan Imperiale, and I am the chairman of the board for the foundation. And it's a real honor to be here tonight and to be speaking to all of you. Just a quick note before we get started. There is a Q&A function in the bottom section of your screen. You should be able to click on a Q&A button and ask questions throughout the presentation. Depending on how timing will go, we might get around to asking or answering some of those questions as our panelists are participating. But if we don't get around to it during the presentations, we will have time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. I will preface that by saying that we cannot provide any direct clinical advice to individual cases, but we will do our best to provide as much background information and resource to you and your family as we possibly can. And if we don't get around to answering all questions, we will do our best to follow up after the webinar as well. The webinar is being recorded and then will be shared with our community and far and wide so that everybody who could not join us here this evening or this evening on the East Coast of the United States will be able to watch everything and catch up on what they missed. So anyway, thanks again to our panelists. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsor of today's webinar, US World Meds, formerly Adaptimmune, and the makers of Tecelra. I think it's important to note that they have not only supported the foundation, but have really become close partners of ours. Maria and Paige, if you are on, those two are members of the US World Meds team who've been absolutely fabulous partners and incredibly supportive. But we really are working together on a number of fronts to combat this disease, and we'll continue to do so until we've solved it. I know Maria and Paige and the rest of the US World Meds team is just as dedicated as we are. So thank you for your support. Next up, Chas, I will let you get a word in edgewise, but wanted to talk a little bit about some of the high-level updates of the foundation and what we have been doing over the last few months since our last webinar. But really, to give those of you a starting background point, the foundation has been working in earnest for the last year now to build infrastructure, and all of that was started by Chas and his wife Laura over 3 years or 4 years ago now, with their efforts to start the Synovial Sarcoma Fund and lead fundraising efforts to start a number of the programs that we have now taken under our wing. So that said, Chas, I'll let you jump in there before I continue.
Yeah, so we have since the last uh, webinar that we host about a year ago, the evolution has been incredible. We have supercharged our foundation with the partnership with Nathan and the resources that his team brings with NJI Media. We couldn't be here without them. And since then, we've added our first full-time resource with Julie. And she's not just a full-time resource. She's also an inspiration to all of us because she's a synovial sarcoma survivor and she has an incredible story to tell. That it 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 it's a story that doesn't like when you're in the middle of treating and fighting and battling this disease, to see someone like her having gone through all of the same things many of you and many of your loved ones have been through over the last um, however many years. She's seen the other, she's seen all sides and she sees the other side too. And now she's dedicated her life to us and to work with our foundation. And I just, we're just, it's a blessing, many ways around for her to be part of this program and the future evolution of what's happening with our foundation. After visiting CTOS, which is an incredibly important event for anyone involved in soft tissue sarcomas, and getting to meet oncologists from all over the world, and the the reception we received from those oncologists and being part of it and highlighting the need to fund and support additional research for synovial sarcoma was incredibly inspirational to us and really justified basically everything we're doing. And I know it gave Nathan and I just all sorts of supercharged inspiration to go bigger, because I feel like with all of the research and with all of the folks that we've met, we feel like there's better treatments ahead. Things are happening very quickly, and in this space, and the foundation wants to be supportive and a part of it and helping lead those innovations. And we're seeing things, new information happening every single day, and I'm so excited to be helping invest in future innovations with these brilliant scientists that are now working on our disease. So thank you, Nathan, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thanks, Chess. And sort of continuing off of that, as I think everybody can see on their screens, wanted to give everyone a quick update on a research landscape audit that we've been conducting over about the last 6 months. And this is perhaps the most important thing that we've done over the last year is to take a really hard look at the entire synovial sarcoma research landscape. Who's working on what, where are the gaps, where are the opportunities for us to make a real difference. And we also want to make sure that if we are to invest tens of millions of dollars in research moving forward, we're doing so as effectively as possible. And to do that, we need to gather as much information as we possibly can. And this audit has given us that ability. So to that end, we have conducted a comprehensive landscape review that identified dozens of researchers who are actively working in the synovial sarcoma space across the globe. And at least 10 of those researchers have enthusiastically agreed to serve on our medical advisory board, which is going to really continue to give us the most direct insight into where all the science is heading. And I think the most important and exciting report from our audit thus far is that there are truly a number of new approaches emerging to treat synovial sarcoma, not just in cell therapy with treatments like Tecelra, but across multiple fronts. For example, one of the things that I've gotten most excited about in the last couple of weeks is we've discovered that pharmaceutical company Takeda developed a drug that didn't get to market because it wasn't effective for another cancer type. However, researchers at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, a few months ago discovered that this drug called TAK 951 could be the most consequential therapy for synovial sarcoma yet. If we can bring it back to life and get this drug off the shelf. And the researchers have hit a brick wall and can't get Takeda to release the drug. But that's where our foundation comes in, and we'll be working hard to unlock that drug, and so that it can be released for use in a synovial sarcoma clinical trial. So there are a number of other examples like that, and programs like that, which our foundation and community will likely need to support in order to bring them across the finish line. And one of the things that I'm most proud of our team for doing is that we're playing the connective tissue within the synovial sarcoma research landscape. And we're not just funding one lab or one trial, we're mapping the entire ecosystem and making sure that all of the researchers in the synovial sarcoma space will be talking to each other and working more closely with each other. And that's how we've discovered we're going to best accelerate progress. And we've been told time and time again by the top researchers across the globe that it will take the effort of our foundation and our community to make sure that momentum stays strong and that the research has a guiding light moving forward. Otherwise, research will continue to happen in sort of a disjointed fashion. And the last thing I'll notice or I'll mention is that it's clear to me, at least, that in the last 18 months, the science towards synovial sarcoma has expanded beyond anything that's happened in the last decade. And we intend to make sure that that level of advancement only continues exponentially moving forward. So that is my exciting report. There will be more to come on our research audit, and it will be released once reviewed by our medical advisory board, so that everybody gets a chance to get a close look at it and to see where the latest treatments and studies are being done, and where therapies will hopefully become available to our patient population. So moving forward, I would be remiss if I didn't give a quick public service announcement for biomarker testing and its importance. And we've heard time and time again over the last year that this is a relatively new part of synovial sarcoma treatment, that it's really critical that all patients get and ask for advanced biomarker testing. One, understanding your HLA type, having your tumor tested for the MAGE-A4 expression and NY-ESO-1 expression is critically important for not only knowing if you qualify for Tecelra or other cellular therapies, but knowing if you qualify for clinical trials now or in the future. And there is a great resource if you have trouble or you hit a brick wall yourself called sarcomabiomarkertesting.com, which I encourage you to go to if you need additional resources on that front. So that said, we're going to move into the most exciting part of today or tonight's presentation, and that's a discussion presentation of our very own Julie Kramer. So Julie, I'd love to highlight you and I'd love to introduce you as the Foundation's Community Engagement and Partnerships Manager. And as I mentioned, she herself is a long-term survivor of synovial sarcoma. Julie, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You've fought this disease with strength and grace. And remarkably, it has been 9 years since your original diagnosis. And during that time, I think it's safe to say you've become the world's top synovial sarcoma a social media influencer. So congratulations on a title that I'm sure you've never wanted to have.
Badge of honor.
But we're lucky that you have that title. And I'd like to start our conversation by asking you to share a little bit more about your journey from your first diagnosis through your recurrences, and perhaps shed some light on how your mindset towards this disease has changed along the way.
Thank you. And thank you. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you, Nathan and Chas. I mean, it's an absolute, there are no words to explain how much of an honor it is to be partnered with the Synovial Sarcoma Foundation. So it's incredible that I get to do this work for a community that I'm just very passionate about. So thank you guys for taking the time to be here with us tonight. And I will try to share it as briefly as I can, but with a history like mine, I'm like, take some time. But so to, I guess, backpedal, I was originally diagnosed in 2014 at the age of 23, and the official diagnosis was stage 4, poorly differentiated synovial sarcoma, primary of the lung. I was originally diagnosed in a local hospital. The oncologist there, they weren't completely sure it was synovial sarcoma, but they gave me 3 months to live. And then I was able to get a second opinion at Penn, which is who I received my treatment from. So got treatment done right away. And since I was given those 3 months, I didn't have the time to, freeze my eggs or any of those things that a 23-year-old getting diagnosed with stage 4 cancer shouldn't really have to think about. But we forewent that, and I got started on chemotherapy right away. I did begin with the AIM regimen, adriamycin, ifosfamide, mesna, and I did 6 total cycles of that, which was about 4 months. It was very brutal for me. I know a lot of people that had the same regimen, and it was smooth, so to speak, but it was not. I was in the hospital after every cycle with like a neutropenic infection, and spent another week in the hospital, and then I had 5 days of freedom before the next cycle. So I got chemo done to shrink the tumor, which was originally 20 centimeters wide. And chemo shrunk it enough, about to the size of a cantaloupe. And we waited a month for my body to get rid of the chemo, and I was able to get surgery done to remove the tumor and clear margins, most of my left lung. I also had ribs 1 and 2 removed, and my phrenic nerve removed, and my subclavian vein removed because it was obliterated by the tumor, what my surgeon's terminology was used. And after surgery, I waited a month of recovery from surgery, and then started proton radiation, which I completed the full 36 rounds of that. And it took a complete 365 days for me to finish treatments. And I was, NED, no evidence of disease. And it was really exciting. And I was so happy. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm done. I can go back to my normal life,
Especially after being given 3 months to live.
Yeah, after 3 months to live. So I spent, a whole year battling. And so it was a very surreal and exciting moment, of course. And, I was in the headspace that like, oh my God, finally I'm done. I can go back to real life. And then that's when I started to, so 3 months later, I had my, my next checkup, and it turns out it recurred. And I didn't know until after surgery, because my surgeon was unsure, and they were like, we're going to take this out anyway. So I found out in post-op that it was cancer, and that it came back. And I remember hearing that felt harder to hear than the initial cancer diagnosis, because it made it more real that this is something that's going to continue in my life. I was a little naive, thinking that I could go back to my normal self and my normal this and that. That doesn't exist after a cancer diagnosis. So I was able to get it surgically removed with the VATS procedure. And then that was it. And I healed, and that was a pretty easy recovery process. And I was good for 2 years. I was gonna go back to college, and 1 week before school starts, I go for my next scans, and it's in both of my lungs, two separate nodules. And I meet with multiple doctors, and they decide the best way to treat it is one with the BATS procedure, which is in the right lung that didn't get radiation in that area. And then the other was treated with the SBRT, like the targeted radiation therapy. And since then, knock on wood, I've been 9 years, no evidence of disease. But I can say that it's been a long journey, and survivorship has also been a long journey. And it's just kind of shaped, like throughout the whole process, I realized this is going to be something that's going to maybe continue. So I need to adjust my mindset.
So what you've gone through is obviously just remarkable and awful all at the same time. And, like so many patients dealing with this disease and caregivers, throughout that whole process, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And, despite that uncertainty and despite everything that you've gone through, you are, like, I think I mentioned this earlier, clearly thriving and doing exceptionally well, both physically, emotionally. You are just an amazing beacon for our whole community. Can you share a little bit on the subject of uncertainty, and through the course of your journey, what have you learned about living with that high level of uncertainty, and what do you wish you could have told your younger self when you were first diagnosed that would help you cope with that moving forward?
Mm-hmm. So, and just bear with me because I wrote down a few like keywords that I wanted to make sure that I share. So I may look down on them, so don't mind me. But it with the uncertainty, how I think of it is life after a cancer diagnosis. You're always going to have this cloud, and have this dark cloud that follows you around everywhere forever, especially with a cancer like sarcoma. And what I have learned, and it takes work, it's waking up every day still and choosing this, is acceptance. And it's not acceptance in the way where it's not weakness and it's not giving up. It's accepting that this is my life, and that I can still live with having this be in my life. With going every 3 months to the scans, it's almost like you're living your life. All right, scans are clear, I'm free for another 3 months. And it's really hard to look into the future, to plan ahead, to make goals for your life and your family and yourself, because you're kind of living by like 3 month increments. But when I really learned to accept it, in the beginning, I wanted to run from this. I wanted to, this is behind me, this is in the past, I don't have to deal with cancer anymore. It's not something that's gonna like control my life. And it doesn't control my life, but accepting it allows me to not let it control my life. Accepting it allows me to like break free from the expectations, and that changed the outcome of my life. So I think acceptance is the big thing there. And it's not like you're accepting this horrible thing. It's you're not letting it have more control than it already does.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important, because when you're going through a cancer diagnosis, as you learn, there's so much out of your control, but there are some things that you can control. And it's really important to highlight that and not lose sight of that, because it's important.
Well, Julie, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the insight you bring to the community, not just tonight, but on a daily basis. And for all of those who've joined tonight, who are part of our Facebook community, especially, and can see your ongoing commentary and posting about your journey. Like it means the world. And as a family member myself of a synovial sarcoma survivor, my husband Eddie, I know how much it means for someone like you to share your story and how much it meant to us when we learned of Eddie's diagnosis. To find you on social media and to see that you were thriving for so many years after having a massive tumor in your chest. So anyway, again, thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you do, everything that you bring to the foundation and the community. Um,
Hey
and
Nathan, one thing
yeah,
too, because she didn't say this, but you did say that you didn't manage to uh harvest your eggs, but you also had
oh my
another
gosh.
miracle as well. So you've experienced multiple miracles, and I this is maybe the biggest miracle of all. So I'd love for you to share that too.
It is, yes. And that's why I did share that I couldn't freeze my eggs, and I took the risk because at 20 I didn't have time was not on my side at the time of diagnosis. And I naturally got pregnant, and now my son is 3 years old, and he's healthy and he's well. And it was, of course, a scary process being a high risk pregnancy, but it's just incredible the way that life finds a way. And I owe so much to my doctors. I mean, my team. I wouldn't be able to live the life I'm living without them. And it's incredible. It's very hard to believe that things are the way they are right now.
Well, thank you, Julie. I really, really appreciate it. And to try and keep us on time, I am going to continue the conversation and move over to Dr. Leitch and Dr. Hurley. And I'd love to move to discussing sort of our resources and research that are now available via the good work that the two doctors that we have on the panel today have been doing. And Dr. Leitch, to give you a little bit more background, is also a pediatric oncologist, and he leads both the developmental therapeutics program and the very rare malignant tumors program at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And Dr. Hurley is an investigator and researcher at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as well, leading some of the most promising work in the field and focused on why synovial sarcoma returns, how it resists treatments, and what we can do about it. So first off, Dr. Leitch, I would love to have you give us a little bit of background and explanation on the synovial sarcoma tumor board and what it is.
Yes, no, thanks, Nathan. And Julie, thank you for sharing your story again. I've had the pleasure of hearing it before, but it's always such an inspiration and very hard to follow. So thank you for setting me up. But yeah, so the tumor board is a resource that was founded by funding from the foundation and from the Spences that started back in 2023. And what it is it's a platform where physicians from all across the world can really talk about patients with synovial sarcoma, both children and adults, with experts in the care of patients, both pediatric and adult oncologists, radiation oncologists, and surgeons. And we discuss the whole gamut of the experience that you just heard about from Julie in terms of diagnosis, genetic testing or biomarker testing, chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, and then follow-up and how we manage these patients. And these are just a couple of images from patients that we discussed recently, but we review the imaging, we talk about the therapy the patients have had or our recommendations for therapy. And if you go into the next slide, the tumor board has had 196 people who are registered. It is only open to physicians so that we can discuss patients in depth, but they come from 84 different institutions really across the world. You can see here representation from most of Europe, the US, Canada, some countries in Asia and Australia. And we've discussed, as of last month, we just had another one today, but we've discussed 40 patients total. About a little over half are adults and a little under half are children, and about half and half with newly diagnosed disease and recurrent disease. Next slide. And so, I think the real benefit of a tumor board is that you get to have discussions by multiple physicians about the care of the patient. And that includes multidisciplinary discussions. So that means physicians that have different practices, radiation oncologists, surgeons, oncologists, as well as different centers. And so while some aspects of the care of patients with synovial sarcoma are standard from one center to the next, others vary, as you sort of heard from Julie's story. And this way, everyone can hear how each other practices and debate the various aspects of those approaches. It also is an opportunity for physicians, like at the first hospital Julie mentioned, where they may not have a lot of experience with this rare cancer, to talk to experts who do have experience, because not all patients can travel. We recognize that some patients are in, parts of the country or parts of the world where travel is more difficult to an experienced center. And this is an opportunity for their treating team to get some of that expertise without having to travel. We also talk about clinical trial options. So mostly that's at recurrence, but I'm talking about what options may be available for patients. And it's important for the research because it helps us understand where there are gaps in knowledge that we really need to try to answer. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but really thinking about what are the key questions that we need to answer to try to advance the field for our patients.
That is awesome. Ted, can you give us an example of a decision that may have been impacted as a result of a doctor consulting with our tumor board?
Yeah, so I think there's several examples. I think one of which actually we were just talking about today was a patient who had synovial sarcoma, and we were talking about whether or not to give chemotherapy for someone with newly diagnosed synovial sarcoma. And that's an area where there is still some variation in practice for which patients need chemotherapy, because there are patients who are cured with surgery alone for small synovial sarcomas upfront. And so we were talking about this as a team, and reached a consensus actually today that a patient didn't need chemotherapy for their synovial sarcoma. So hopefully sparing them some of the side effects that Julie mentioned, while still hopefully allowing them to preserve a good outcome.
That's fabulous.
Ted, how would somebody get their case presented to the tumor board?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I think it really is important that the physician present the case so that we can have all the medical details that we need to discuss the case in depth. So I would reach out to your physician. We do have a flyer that you can give your physician that talks about the tumor board, that has the ways to contact us and get registered for it. So we're certainly happy to share that after the webinar, but ask your doctor is the best way.
And in fact, on the first slide that we showed during this discussion, there was a link, and we'll share all of this with everyone afterwards as well. But if you go to synovialsarcoma.org/tumor board, you can find more information there and all of those resources. And it will guide you on how to hopefully get your doctors engaged as well. And obviously, if you ever need some assistance or additional questions answered, you can always reach out to us at the foundation too. Well, Ted, thank you very much for giving us that overview. Really, really helpful. Something that none of us wish we ever knew anything about, tumor boards, but really thankful that they exist, and that the doctors who participate in our tumor board are dedicated to helping other patients and other doctors reach strong decisions with their patients. So,
And I think also too, Nathan, it's important to clarify a lot of larger institutions and hospitals have internal tumor boards. And so
yeah,
oftentimes that nomenclature of tumor board gets mixed up a little bit, because I've spoken with others that have been diagnosed and said, no, we've already presented to the tumor board. Well, it was presented to a local tumor board at your hospital that may see 3 synovial sarcoma cases a year. Very different than the international tumor board that we've established with Dr. Leitch, who see dozens of cases a month. Way different, and incredibly important that you understand the difference between the two and really advocate for yourself and your case to your physician to get your case presented to the International Tumor Board, which meets once a month. So wanted to
such a
clarify.
good point. Yeah, absolutely. Um, moving on to our next topic is tumor glow and the surgical trial that we're leading. Ted, can you walk us through what tumor glow is and why it's consequential for surgeons to have during a resection of synovial sarcoma?
Yeah, so tumor glow is a dye that's you can give to the patient. You give it through an IV the day before surgery. And then what happens is that dye accumulates in the tumor and it's a fluorescent dye. So it glows. You can see this picture here. It's glowing green in this patient. This is actually a picture of a patient's lungs where you can see the spots of tumor glowing green. Um, and so what they've done in adults is they've studied this and they've shown in some patients that this can help them identify additional nodules that might have been missed by standard surgery. So when the surgeon goes in to do lung surgery, it's often with a camera. Julie talked about a VAT. That's what that is they go in with a camera. And you can see a picture here that's just like that. And they have to identify what's tumor and what's normal. And sometimes that can be very hard. So this helps surgeons identify additional spots of tumor that might be missed by just looking with their bare eyes. And so what we're funding is a trial of this for children to try to expand this beyond adult patients because it hasn't been studied in children before. And the hope is that this increases the chance that all of the tumor can be removed by surgery, which will improve patient outcomes. Next slide. And so again, this is just what I said and a couple more examples, but this the data on the left is from the adult study, and essentially what it shows is that when they went in to do surgery, they could find 24 more nodules by tumor glow than they found with their eyes alone, which on almost all of those were cancer. And on the right, it's just additional pictures of what this looks like in the operating room, so you can get a sense of how this just makes these tumors glow. And I remember one of the first surgeons, a surgeon here at CHOP recently tried this for the first time for a patient and came back with an email with a series of exclamation marks about how excited he was to try this again because he just couldn't believe how much easier it made the surgery to really identify what he was looking for in the operating rooms. But this trial is in the process of getting final IRB approval, and then will open in this spring.
And one other thing too, Julie was one of the original recipients of the clinical trial for tumor glow back in, when was it, Julie? 2017, was it?
It was 2014. It was my first surgery.
And developed by our very own Dr. Singh Hall, who was your surgeon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was very new at the time. And, he called me a few days before and was like, "You want to try this?" I'm like, "Sure." He's like, "You're the first sarcoma patient to do it." I'm like, "Okay." So
Yeah.
what do I have to lose?
Julie is one of the patients in this figure here, but not the pictures on the right, but just the figure on the left.
Okay.
That is awesome and really, really exciting. We're excited to get this clinical trial started so that we can expand use, obviously, into children, which I will say is, both unfortunate and good that our society is so protective of children, but oftentimes they're second to get these types of treatments. And so it takes organizations like ours to help fund and push clinical trials over the finish line in pediatric cases. And so this is obviously a prime example of where we can be extraordinarily helpful. So that said, I'd like to move on to another really exciting project that continues to grow, and that is the Synovial Sarcoma Registry and Biorepository. And the first thing I'll say is that as a patient, it really is the most crucial step that you can take to help advance synovial sarcoma research. And this could not have been a better example to come up this week. But this photo is of a young patient named Jonathan, and he is about the bravest kid I've ever seen in my life. He has synovial sarcoma. and has joined the registry and the biorepository. And when he found out that his tumor could help find a cure, he lit up and said, "That's awesome." He has taken a photo there holding one of our boxes and advocacy kits that we send to everyone who joins the registry and biorepository. That's filled with swag, including the wristbands that I'm wearing and that he's wearing, along with a number of other resources for patients and families. So, Dr. Leitch, going back to you, would you mind sort of walking through some of the highlights of the registry, why it's important, and where we are right now with its status?
Yeah, so thanks, Nathan. The registry is a way to collect data from patients with synovial sarcoma so that we can aggregate it all in one place. So as Nathan mentioned, there's hospitals that treat 2 or 3 patients a year, or sometimes even fewer patients with synovial sarcoma. And if we don't put all that data together, we really can't all learn together, and that really slows down the process. So this was launched again back in 2023, and you can see the number of patients who have enrolled who have increased over time and has really started to increase quite rapidly again. So I appreciate all of you who may have joined this, and really appreciate the ongoing support from the foundation that's really been critical to growing the number of patients that enrolled. And so from all of these patients, from all of you, we are collecting medical records so that we can understand your treatments, your pathology, your imaging studies, all the scans, and putting all that data together so we have standardized data that we can understand how patients do with various treatments with synovial sarcoma. And then we're also collecting tissue, both leftover tissue from surgery, as well as blood specimens from some patients, and putting some of those into mice to try to make living models of synovial sarcoma in mice. And if you go to the next slide, I think the key reasons we need to do this are 2 things. So one of which is to help us better understand how to use the treatments we have today. And this is sort of what I was just talking about in terms of which patients need chemotherapy and which don't, whether radiation given before surgery or radiation is better given after surgery. A lot of questions that we still don't know all the answers to. And so by putting together all this data, we can learn from all of the patients who contribute their data. And we started to put together some abstracts highlighting some of this data. So these are 3 posters. You're not supposed to be able to read them, but just showing that we put together 3 posters that were presented at the Connective Tissue Oncology Society. So a large meeting of sarcoma doctors from across the world over the last 2 years, really highlighting some of the initial things that we're learning about from how patients are treated on the registry and what their outcomes are. And then the next slide, I think equally important, of course, is that we aren't satisfied. None of us are satisfied with the treatment options that we have today and want to improve outcomes by making better treatments for the future. And so we are using these specimens, the tissue from patients, to really think about how do we improve outcomes. And so that includes looking for things like new ways to harness the immune system to treat the cancer, growing these models in the lab so that we can test various drugs or therapies on these cells to try to identify what works best to kill the cancer cells without killing the normal cells. And then, test those eventually in models that are more representative of what happens in patients in animals. So this is really dependent on having a broad range of these models so that we can understand the entire sort of spectrum of synovial sarcoma. And so again, all these contributions are really critical to driving that progress.
Dr. Leitch, if someone has tissue from several years ago and they've just joined our foundation, is that something that they could get to you, or is that something that you're still interested in if it's not, a surgery that's happening tomorrow?
Yes, absolutely. We're interested in both. So if people are on the registry or would like to join the registry and have tissue they can contribute, if you contact us, we're happy to work with you or you and your hospital to get that tissue. And as you mentioned, we're also especially interested in surgeries that are happening in the future, because sometimes we're able to save some of that tissue in a living fashion so that it can grow in some of these models, and do additional testing with that. So if you have a surgery coming up and you're on the registry, please do also reach out, and we're happy to try to coordinate with your team to see if they're able to send some living tissue from that surgery.
And that includes a recurrence that may have happened that you may have to deal with right now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Really awesome information that you've shared. Thank you very much. And the last thing I'll mention is that it is very easy for patients to join the registry. You don't need to have your tumor sample stored in your freezer at home. You don't need to coordinate getting it shipped to our research facility at CHOP and Penn Medicine. There's a full research team that manages all of it. You sign a consent form, you provide some information about where you've been treated, and the research team takes it from there. So taking that forward one step and showing how those biosamples have been used, I want to bring Dr. Hurley into the discussion. I'd love to have you start by walking us through the research you're leading and the questions you're trying to answer with that research.
Yeah, absolutely. First, say good evening, everyone, and thank you to Nathan and Julie and Chaz for the opportunity to be a part of this. It's really an honor. And my hope tonight is just to share a little insight into what kind of research that we are thinking about here. I work with Ted and then Dr. Malay Haldar over at the University of Pennsylvania. And I think of myself as someone who sits between the laboratory space and the clinic. And so I know Nathan kind of talked about this at the beginning, but I just always highlight the disclosure that I'm going to share some things that are really early on and have a lot of hope that we think will make it to the clinic. But unfortunately, it's not yet clinical advice. And so you can go ahead to the next slide. And I'll have you advance one further even, if you could. When I think about the research that we are doing, I think the goal, kind of Nathan, to answer your question, is really how can we advance treatment for individuals with synovial sarcoma? And that is our driving force and our goal. And our hope is to address that really from three different approaches. First, thinking about how we can further improve what therapies we can give individuals at diagnosis. Dr. Leish talked about the tumor board discussion about whether or not we need to give chemotherapy. And a lot of those selection discussions come from older categories that think about how big the tumor is or how the tumor looks under the microscope. And we know that to be a really important decision, but we also know that we've advanced a lot in scientific technology, as Nathan alluded to with the research audit. And so one of the things we're really interested in is trying to figure out, can we incorporate more information about the synovial sarcoma genetics, genomics, what's in the tumor, and can that help us give guidance on which treatments individuals will get? And so one of the things we've been looking at is something called a SYN-SARC score, which is another abbreviation to add to the list. But it is, instead of, you hear a lot about the fusion that synovial sarcoma has, instead of one genetic change, this is looking at a collection of 67 genes. And it tells us a little bit about how unstable the genome is. And when we looked at this score in a group of patients with synovial sarcoma and other rare sarcomas, our initial research and results show that this score or this signature may help us further understand specifically high-risk tumors. And so I've put the two bright pink arrows there. You can see that individuals who had a tumor with a low-risk SYN-SARC score had a longer time before their tumor came back or did not recur at all, compared to individuals whose tumor had a high-risk score. And again, this information is coming from patients who had given their tumors at the time of starting treatment. And so this is all things that we're able to kind of deduce looking back at tumors in the past. And so now our job is to use this information to look at tumors at the time of diagnosis to see if this observation holds true. But it's just one of the many things that we're trying to do when we think about research as an example. Another thing that I'm really interested in understanding is how the tumor communicates with all of the other cells around it. We know that the tumor is not just in the milieu. Julie talked about her large tumor in the lung. That is communicating with immune cells, with lung tissue, and all of those other things. And so the second thing that we're looking at is how can we identify new treatment options by understanding how the tumor communicates with the tumor microenvironment. And so if you want to go to the next slide, this is just again similar to Dr. Leish's picture with the poster, a conglomerate of cells and pictures to give you an example of how quite messy the tumor is in terms of what it's interacting with. And we know that the synovial sarcoma cells can actually kind of take charge and make all of the other cells around it support it. And we want to step back and say, how can we actually help the neighboring cells in the body take charge and actually decrease the tumor or prevent the tumor from growing further? One of the things that we're really interested in is not only can we drug the tumors to change the tumor microenvironment, is we know that for some individuals with synovial sarcoma, they get treatment and their tumors never come back. We know that for some individuals, unfortunately, they get treatment. Their tumor goes away, as Julie shared. Some nodules come back. We're able to take those out surgically. And then that is no evidence of disease. And that is kind of their journey. And then we know that for others who undergo treatment, even the tumor can grow right through treatment. And so one of the things that I'm really interested in studying is how is synovial sarcoma tumor responding to therapy? What is changing about it that makes it even more aggressive? And when we understand that, how can we then identify therapies that are specifically designed to go after that recurrent and aggressive synovial sarcoma? And I think, Dr. Leish highlighted the powers of the registry and repository. And I think this is one question that we're really excited to have the community and the resources of the registry and the biorepository to leverage and answer this question. Because there really is power in numbers. And so because so many individuals and families have really worked to get their tissue to the repository, we now have samples from individuals at diagnosis, at recurrence, and we can look at the difference between those two tumors using genetics and other scientific technologies. And then we actually have a mouse model that we can take those genetic changes that we see into the mouse to really study that and ask questions about it. And while this is something that takes time and we won't be able to turn those results around really quickly, I do think long term, this is really something that's going to give us an opportunity to understand how tumors grow. And so, Nathan, that was a lot of quick information, but the summary is that we take the need for advancement really seriously. We have some things that I think are really close to getting to the clinic, and then some things that are going to take a little bit of time. But you had asked me to think about things that are giving me hope, and I was kind of smiling to myself as you were talking about the research audit, because the things that I had listed were the power of collaboration. I think scientifically, we're seeing a lot of collaboration driven in part by the conversations that you guys are creating, the environments that you guys are creating with the foundation. An incredible community of families and individuals and survivors who are all really coming together to then create resources that I think we take very seriously as stewards of to really try and make scientific discoveries that we can get back into the clinic as quickly as we can.
That is amazing. And Dr. Hurley, you were very thorough in answering my question and answered about three additional questions as well, which is just perfect. You made my job much easier. So thank you so much for being brilliant.
Yeah.
I want to transition from sort of the lab where you sit back to actually both you and Dr. Leish to talk about sort of the future of synovial sarcoma research and sort of the most promising aspects of that you're seeing. So Ted, maybe I know you shared a few slides with us as well. Perhaps you want to talk first on that subject.
Sure, happy to. So if you go to the next slide, I think synovial sarcoma, as Nathan mentioned, it has been really exciting to be in part in this field in terms of being able to see us making progress, although of course not to the extent that we want to yet. But for decades, and when I trained, really the only treatments for synovial sarcoma were surgery, radiation, and AIM. You heard about chemotherapy, and there were really not any other good options when patients had a recurrence. So next slide. I think, one of the first exciting things that happened was in 2009 when pazopanib, which is a drug that works in a different way than chemotherapy by blocking cell signaling instead of trying to just kill all of the fast-growing cells, was reported to work in some patients with synovial sarcoma. But it certainly wasn't a home run. About 14% of patients had their tumors shrink with pazopanib, and about half had their tumors stay away for at least 3 months when they were treated. So some efficacy, but not remarkable. Next slide. In 2024, you heard about afami-cel. So this is a novel therapy where patients are actually given their own living T cells that have been changed so that they can recognize synovial sarcoma. So part of the immune system changed to recognize a specific protein on the surface of synovial sarcoma and kill those cells. And this had a better response rate. So 39% of patients had significant shrinkage, and the amount of patients that stayed progression-free was longer, including some patients that have stayed progression-free for years after this therapy, so stayed in remission for years after this therapy. And so this has been really exciting to get to see that moving forward. But of course, we're not there yet. And I think there's really in my mind, two key strategies that we need to think about as we think about how to move the field forward. The first is, how do we further augment the use of the immune system to treat synovial sarcoma? So this is like what Dr. Hurley was talking about, teaching those cells that surround synovial sarcoma to actually kill the cancer instead of supporting the cancer. And there's a variety of different ways that we can do this, but I think this is one of the key messages. And we need to think about, how do we expand the number of patients who can benefit beyond those who are eligible for afami-cel, which is only a minority of patients with synovial sarcoma, because it does require the presence of two biomarkers to be eligible. Next slide. I think the other way is that we know that synovial sarcoma is driven by this specific fusion. And if we can target that specific fusion, then that may cause the cells to die. And so figuring out how to target this fusion, which is something that's been known for a long time and hard to do, but there are some new exciting ways, one of which Nathan mentioned at the beginning, a drug from Takeda, but there's a variety of different ways that people are working to try to study how do we target this fusion and cause the cells to die. So I think, it has been a really exciting time to think about these new approaches. I don't know, Dr. Hurley, do you have other comments?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on next steps echo yours as well, and that's part of the focus. And I think the other thing that ties everything together is we continue to have better models to ask these questions. And so my hope is that that will also improve our ability to move from making observations in the lab to actually designing drugs that we can bring to clinic, is the ability to have better ways to ask these questions.
Well, I really appreciate your insights there, and we are right at time, which is amazing. And I want to get to some of our questions here. We have a couple of questions. One being, is the registry only open to US patients? Dr. Leitch, would you like to take that one?
So till now, it has only been open to US patients. We did just get approval to expand it to some international patients. And so we're working through the sign-offs on that process, but hope within the coming months that we'll be able to enroll patients internationally as well.
And our board is actually actively pursuing board membership outside of the US to help advocate. We're going to need resources locally in those specific regions. And so that's something that Nathan and I will be working on in the coming months to help support the international teams to collect the data, because we're going to need your help.
Absolutely.
Sorry, real quick, and just to continue to follow along with us on everything, because we're just as excited to go international with that as well. So you will be notified right away once that's in the works. So.
Good note. Another note and question: tumor glow seems like a no-brainer. Is it used broadly or still investigational? Dr. Leitch, you want to jump in on that?
That is a great question. So the drug that's used in tumor glow is approved, but it's not approved for this specific use. So the physicians have to use it what we call off-label, and some people are comfortable doing that and some are not. But I think the real importance of doing these types of clinical trials is to really establish it as something that can be used for patients when we get those results and then can share them with other physicians.
And I can tell you too that just in interviewing different surgeons from around the country that deal with synovial sarcoma actively, they want to use the dye, and they have used it, and they will use it off label, and you should be asking about it. And if they won't do it, we can provide a list of surgeons who are using it today. So,
Yeah.
advocate for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a more challenging question, and this is from Eddie in New Zealand, whose 15-year-old son has unfortunately been given 6 months to live. He has a tumor in his lower spine that was resistant to AIM chemotherapy, and now has metastasis in his lungs. They are happy to travel anywhere in the world for a second opinion and treatment. What do we suggest is the best way to look for getting additional second opinions for treatments? And Dr. Leitch, I point this question back to you. Could you perhaps give some advice on what they might want to do in that case?
I'm very sorry to hear about your son, but I think there's a few different options I would suggest. There is something called the SARC Consortium, the Sarcoma Alliance, that puts together a list of sarcoma centers in the US and abroad. So you certainly could look at that for lists of physicians that have experience. We're also happy if you reach out, happy to help try to connect you with a physician locally who may have experience with this. And if you're interested, of course, we'd be happy to see your son as well. If you reach out, can't of course provide medical advice over this forum, but happy to see him as well.
Chas, I think you probably have some experience in a similar regard with your son, Callan, who was 16 when he was first diagnosed and was told that he had 3 months to live.
That seems to be the number, 3 months to a year. When Julie experienced the same thing. But what I can tell you is you have to go get second, third. We got 5 opinions, 3 of which said he was going to die tomorrow, and 2 of which said, give us a shot. And so you got to go find the one that's going to give you a shot. And you can't take no for an answer. And so we've heard it. As a parent, I've heard that. It's devastating. You feel like the world is falling apart and you have no control. But I can tell you that there are many other institutions that may have a different opinion. Not to say, they're going to be right or wrong, but at least go seek second, third, fourth opinions. Every oncologist I interact with, every surgeon I interact with, doesn't have an ego when it comes to this disease, because we're still experimenting with treatments. We don't have a cure. We're still seeking a cure. And so, but you're not alone. We've heard that before, and I heard that same thing 4 years ago, and my son is a junior in college right now. So, there's the other side, and so it's up to you as the parent to go find those options.
Thank you, Chas.
Mm-hmm.
We have one last question, or at least one more question. What are your thoughts on time from diagnosis to getting to a sarcoma expert. So what is the impact there on how long you should wait and what that impact might be on your final treatment? Dr. Leitch, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So, like Chess said, I think it's important to get additional opinions, and I encourage my own patients to get opinions. And so, if you haven't, don't ever feel afraid to ask your physician about getting a second opinion as well. Like I said, none of us have an ego, and I think it's actually in this disease we're all very collaborative and want to work together. So, certainly do that. I think it of course depends on the specifics of how you present, but I encourage people to get an opinion with all of the relevant specialties that are going to take care of their patient, their child, or themselves before they sort of embark on treatment if that's safe to do. So that includes a surgeon, a radiation doctor, and an oncologist, and not just to get an opinion from one. And I would try to do that if possible before you start treatment. There are obviously exceptions. Some people present where they need treatment right away. And if that's the situation, things like the tumor board can also help.
Yeah, and I think that's important to talk about a comprehensive care team, not just the oncologist, but you need all three pillars to address synovial sarcoma, the radio-oncologist and the surgeon as well. So that's your team, and you need to be close to all three of them, and they all need to have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe the last question that we have is the NIH has recently approved the study of uh, ivermectin for cancer treatment, and most physicians shy away from discussing non-traditional treatments, but I'm going to ask anyway. Dr. Leitch or Dr. Hurley, any thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, I think I don't know that there's great data specifically for ivermectin, and I think that's the purpose of doing a study, is to really understand how these things work or don't work. I will say that and I think most doctors, if you bring these things up, are happy to talk about the various options. Some of the chemotherapies we use are, extracted from the barks of trees. So it's not that people are opposed to using natural medicines or other medicines. It's just that some of the things that there's just not enough data yet to know whether they may or may not work. And that's why I think participating in clinical trials is so helpful to the community so that we can better understand these things.
And I can tell you from experience, I've asked Dr. Leitch, because he's my son's doctor, every one of those questions you should not be afraid to ask about any non-traditional or non-labeled drug to be used. And he's been very honest about, well, we do, it could have kind of a counter effect on the drug you're already giving him. So there is data. So he actually has shared data with me to say, well, we don't know if it's effective or not, but we know it could actually impact the efficacy of the drug we're currently giving him. So I would, before doing that, just make sure that you've run it by your oncologist to make sure there's no counter activity that could happen. I thought that was really helpful to me when I was asking you those questions, Ted.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I think that I agree. I would just try to encourage you to have a good dialogue with your oncologist and to find an oncologist that you feel comfortable having those conversations with.
Yeah. And if you don't, right. If you don't, if he's not giving you the answer and you don't feel comfortable, you need to find another oncologist. So, which we did. I think we went through what, 4? So yeah.
I know we're past time, and Dr. Hurley and Dr. Leitch, I know that you have got busy schedules and hopefully some family time occasionally. But I've got one more question, and then if I've missed any, I promise that we will get back to you after the webinar ends and within the next few days. But do big cancer centers use our tumor board as well?
So yes, I think we have a mixture of who joins the tumor board. There are definitely small centers, but there are also, good regular representation from big cancer centers as well, big sarcoma centers that also join the tumor board. And that's where a lot of, the expertise comes from on that call.
Yeah, and I will add that from the foundation's perspective, we have been advocating for some of the top known sarcoma doctors around the country and around the world to join as well, so that not necessarily to present their own cases if they don't have any relevant cases, but to just be participants to provide that resource to other doctors. So definitely a big part of what we're offering through the tumor board. I want to thank everybody for joining this evening or this morning, wherever you are around the world. Really, really appreciate not only the support, but also just the fact that we have got such a tremendous community coming together to advocate for our patients and loved ones. It means the world that we've got so many dedicated doctors and researchers, and throughout this whole process, getting to meet the amazing community members and other patients. It has truly been the honor of my life to be in this position. As sad as it is that my husband has had to go through this horrific disease. And thankfully, I see a tremendous amount of hope on the horizon, and our hope is to do whatever we can to support patients today with the treatments that are available, but to push as hard as humanly possible to make sure that new treatments are brought to market and to our patient population as quickly as possible. And we're doing everything we possibly can, and welcome any additional support that anyone can provide. And we'll continue to fight on everybody's behalf who's joined us. And anyway, thank you again to everybody, Dr. Leitch, Dr. Hurley, for your insights and continued leadership. And I hope all of you continue to fight as hard as you are. And please reach out to us whenever you have any questions. If you haven't been able to ask a question or we haven't been able to answer them here, we're available. And
we're going to be coming out with our big investment opportunities for research very soon, right, Nathan? And I don't want to miss that opportunity to be a little bit commercial, because this disease is going to take all of you and all of us. It's not going to be funded by the government. It's going to be funded by us and all of you here to help move the needle forward. These orphan diseases don't get the attention they need. The NIH is not going to be sending us millions of dollars to do this. It's going to be up to us to fund it. And that's why we're being very, very critical about where we're going to be investing our resources. And so we'll be having our publication very soon that you guys everyone can see where we're going to be pointing our resources.
Good way to end. Thank you all, and have a lovely evening or day wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.